Do you need to live in a Spanish-speaking country in order to become fluent in Spanish? Let's talk about it. Let's start with no, you don't. And in fact, I'll take it a step further and say simply living in a Spanish-speaking country does not guarantee that you will become fluent in Spanish. I live in Puerto Rico and there are lots of gringos here, and I'm going to intentionally use the term gringos because I can't say Americans, being that Puerto Ricans are also American citizens. In Spanish, there is a term, estadounidense, used for people that are specifically from the United States. We don't have that term in English. We call ourselves Americans. So I am intentionally using the term gringos to refer to people from the United States that are living here in Puerto Rico. There are many who live here and have lived here for years, some more than a decade, and are not fluent in Spanish. There are thousands, tens of thousands of immigrants in the United States that have lived there for years and are not fluent in English. If this is making you feel some type of way, that's based on your own opinions and feelings about the matter, which honestly do not affect the fact that immigrants all over the world, adult immigrants in particular, move to countries and do not end up becoming fluent in the language that's spoken there. Why is that? Well, if you can do your job in your native language, and if the people you most speak with, if you have your family there, if your partner is there, and they likely share your native language, then you're not really forced to use the language that's spoken in any meaningful way. You're pretty much limited to transactional language in that country, going to the gas station, the grocery store, the pharmacy, etc. And for more complex situations like doctor's appointments, then you can often use a translator. For families that immigrate to a foreign country, oftentimes it ends up being the kid that becomes the translator for the parents. The truth is, even if you move to a Spanish-speaking country, you will actually have to keep working on it. You will have to learn and practice new vocab. You will have to work on grammar. You will have to review and maybe even rewrite your corrections, or you'll continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. AKA, you'll have to make an effort. You don't learn a language via osmosis when you're an adult and you're not forced to use the language in any meaningful way. This idea of needing to be immersed in order to reach the level of fluency that you desire has come up a lot lately with my students. And to those students, I want to ask, in this dream or this plan to live abroad, are you imagining that you'll be there permanently? Most students that I talk to think in terms of some weeks, some months, or maybe even a year living in a Spanish-speaking country. So I wonder, what do you think will happen when you go back to the United States or from whence it is you came? You'll have to keep working on Spanish. That's what will happen. Let me be the testimony for this. I studied abroad in Ecuador. I lived with an Ecuadorian family for 4 months. My Spanish improved greatly. Post-college, although I was working for a nonprofit that served the Latino community, I was not actively using my Spanish. I was behind my little desk working on resource development, writing grants, etc. And after 4 years of not actively working on or practicing my Spanish, I could not even hold the most basic of conversations. 4 months abroad, living with a Spanish-speaking family did not mean that I was set for life. I say it over and over again so many times that I'm tired of hearing myself say it. Learning a language is more like the habit of exercise or the habit of maintaining a healthy diet than it is anything else. You can work with a personal trainer and really focus on making healthy dietary choices for a year. But as soon as you stop making healthy choices as far as your diet's concerned, or making the effort to get exercise, what happens? You lose it. Most of you that have already been working on Spanish for a long time know that this is the case. I'm sure that you've had the experience of working on it consistently and seeing the progress and then falling off for whatever length of time and then feeling like you have to start over. I say all of this so that you will stop romanticizing being immersed in Spanish. It absolutely helps, and I'm about to go over all the ways in which it helps in just a moment. But I need you to realize it is not the magic pill that you think it is. I will not deny that there are some pretty big benefits to being immersed in the language you're trying to learn. Let's talk about some of those benefits now. Number one, you have a constant reinforcement of vocab just in your surroundings, which when you're not immersed, you have to create that reinforcement and that repetition of vocab on your own. It's more effort. Why is this alone such a big benefit? Because vocab is more important than grammar when learning a foreign language. You can make grammar mistakes and still be understood. But if you don't have a critical mass of vocab, you will often just be left out of conversations. A, because you won't be able to follow, and B, because you don't have enough vocab to be able to contribute. Getting to a place where you have that critical mass of vocab takes a long time. And this is why I say, and I will die on this hill, that I don't know a single student that I consider advanced who's been learning Spanish for less than 5 years. The estimate is that in order to be considered fluent or at a near native speaker level in the language, a person must know more than 10,000 words in the language. Find me someone who can learn 10,000 words in a year. All these videos you're seeing on YouTube, I learned Spanish in a year. Okay. How much can they talk about? With only a year, your ability to speak Spanish is limited to some very specific topics. Of course, excluding prodigies that can actually learn 10,000 words in a year. I've personally not met one yet. So this reinforcement of vocab, this constant exposure to vocab is a huge benefit to being immersed. Being that a lack of vocab, more so than imperfect grammar, is what's going to impede you from having meaningful connections or conversations in the language. Let's talk about the second big benefit of being immersed: endurance. If you've had some experience with being immersed or having to communicate in Spanish at length, you will notice that at first your battery runs out pretty quickly. When I first got to Puerto Rico, I would say that my endurance was about 4 hours of communicating 100% in Spanish before I was in a no more Spanish mode. After 4 hours, I could still listen and follow along to what was being said, but there was no more Spanish coming out of my mouth. If I opened my mouth, it would be English. You really get to a place where your brain's like, I'm not doing this anymore. The thing that happens when you're immersed is that even on that day when your battery has drained and you're in a no more Spanish place, the next day you wake up and you have to do it again. Throughout the entire process of learning Spanish, becoming fluent in Spanish, and even after reaching fluency, you will have bad days. Days that you're really tired or you're impatient, or for my ladies, where we're hormonal and you just don't freaking feel like speaking Spanish. Immersion forces you to keep speaking Spanish even through your bad days. If you're not immersed in the language and you're having a bad day, then you can just simply decide, I'm not speaking Spanish today, guys. You have less of that option when you're immersed. I cannot tell you guys how many times within my first 6 months of teaching yoga in Spanish that I would be on my way to the yoga studio and I would say, no Spanish today. You know what? A lot of Puerto Ricans understand English, and plus, even if not, they can just follow my body, no Spanish today. But what would happen? I'd walk into the yoga studio and my students immediately greet me in Spanish, start speaking to me in Spanish. And here I am 4 years later, all those times I did not want to teach the class in Spanish. And I have not once taught a yoga class in English to my Spanish speaking students. Tired, hormonal, frustrated, didn't matter. I have had to go through my ups and downs and still produce Spanish throughout them. That really does something to your stamina and your resilience in your second language. And finally, the reason why I decided that immersion was absolutely the right choice for me is that being immersed allows you to develop who you are in many different environments. It allows you to develop the different facets of who you are as a person because you're placed in those situations. Who are you in the language when you're interacting socially with people of your age? Who are you in Spanish when you're in the workplace? Who are you in Spanish in your relationship or with your partner's family? Being immersed helps offer you the wide gamut of experiences to allow you to develop who you are. in Spanish. Now, all that being said, I did start this video by saying you don't have to be immersed. Hold that thought. I'm editing and I realize I should have said, I told you at the beginning of this video that you don't need to live abroad in order to become fluent. So how might you become fluent while living your life in an English-speaking country? Let's talk about it. Number one, and I know that this is not an option for everyone, but truly the best way to become fluent while not immersed in the language is to be in a relationship where Spanish is the primary language spoken. I'm not talking about being with somebody who's bilingual, who shares your native language and is very confident in it. Because in that case, if you're only intermediate beginner in Spanish, then your relationship's going to happen in English. My boyfriend is bilingual, but I would say he speaks to me 80 to 90% in Spanish. And that has absolutely had a big impact on my fluency. If you're already in a committed relationship with somebody who doesn't speak Spanish, there are other options for becoming fluent while living in English. The other would be to use Spanish at work daily. Not, oh, I have an opportunity to speak Spanish once every couple months at my work. If you're forced to use Spanish almost daily in the workplace, then you will make great strides in fluency. However, the downfall to this is exactly what I mentioned with all those people that claim they've learned Spanish in a year. You'll get really good at talking about things related to work. And you might feel like in other areas, maybe more socially speaking, you lack the fluency that you'd like to have. And lastly, being part of a Spanish-speaking community. Even if your romantic relationship can't be in Spanish, having strong friendships where you speak Spanish will be a huge benefit to you developing who you are in the language, to feeling less trapped, to feeling less like a bland, dumbed down version of who you really are. It does take more effort to reach fluency when you're not immersed, for all of the reasons that I talked about of how immersion helps you. But remember, even when you're immersed, you have to keep working on it. If you're immersed for a short chunk of time and then you go back to the United States, you'll have to keep working on it. I'm so sorry if, because of all these people on the internet that are more interested in making money than helping you, you have failed to realize that you are entering the lifetime membership of learning Spanish. You cannot do exercise for 5 years and then stop for 10 and believe that you're going to maintain the same level of fitness. You cannot be immersed for 1 year and then go back and stop working on Spanish and expect to coast on that for the rest of your life. If you want to become fluent, let me tell you the secret. Look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm committing to this for the rest of my life. There is no magic pill. It's just me showing up over and over and over again for the rest of my life.